A family torn apart by a terrible crime. Richard Chamberlain stars in tomorrow's late film, The Other Side of Murder, midnight on BBC One.
I'm cheating on my husband with a man whose ambition is to be more like him.
What are you, Tom? A cop pretending to be a villain or a villain pretending to be a cop?
A girl leaves your stable, she seems to attract violence. She needed me.
She needed anyone who could fund her next fix.
Paying the price of forbidden love.
Just because you're getting away with it doesn't mean you're invisible.
Undercover Heart, Thursday at 9:30 on BBC One.
The late night weather now on BBC One with Rob McElwee.
Hello, this one's turned into a bit of a mess, to be quite honest. Came in nicely, the rain fell over Northern Ireland and Scotland, then the whole thing sort of broke up and we've got outbreaks of heavy rain all over the country, and this is just 8 o'clock in the evening. If you pick up the computer forecast, it sort of smooths it out and gives a general impression of what is happening. The whole lot is moving eastwards, and afterwards we've got quite a few hours of dryish weather before the next main rain comes in for Wednesday evening, effectively, or early Thursday. Just a few showers in between. So the whole lot's moving on fairly swiftly, a suggestion of quite a bit of wind. Indeed, that's the case. All from the right direction if you're not keen on frost. It's all from the southwest. It's all pretty warm. Temperatures are going to be, I think, mighty high. By the end of tonight, 13 degrees is quite likely. It's fairly widespread in much of England, and 8 even in Highland Scotland. Now, at the moment, the forecast for this coming morning is for the rain still to be there by lunchtime in Kent and East Sussex and back in Shetland, with a few showers, fairly hefty ones, in probably mid-morning. They'll move eastwards, so much of the afternoon will be fine for England and Wales. The showers will tend to be lighter, but at the end of the afternoon into the evening, more rain back for Northern Ireland and indeed for Scotland, and windy for the whole day. But despite the wind, the temperatures will be quite high, and I think it could feel quite pleasant.
Planning ahead can save you endless grief. Something you can do without on fireworks night. On fireworks night, do things right.
Watching birds in the traditional way can only reveal part of their lives. To get the full picture, we've had to try and use a lot of new techniques. To tell, for example, the story of their history and evolution, their startling ways of behaving, their strategies for feeding and for mating, and glimpses of rare and elusive birds. So join me for the television series that will change the way you look at the life of birds. Tomorrow, BBC One, 8 o'clock.
And what's Cook's nickname now around the Foreign Office?
Finished.
Ready, steady.
A new series of Have I Got News For You starts Friday at 10 on BBC Two.
Now on BBC One, BBC News 24.
Tens of thousands of French high school students have been holding demonstrations for the second time in a week. They're demanding improved conditions in schools and colleges. Once again, violence flared during the marches. More than 80 people were arrested.
After last week's violence, when scores of cars were overturned and burnt and shops and cafes looted, police were taking no chances. 4,500 were deployed along the route of the march. But hundreds of youths had come to the protest with the single aim of creating trouble and, if possible, using the march as a pretext for smashing and looting. Within minutes of its starting, they were stoning police. Clashes continued all along the route of the protest, with sporadic police charges and youths smashing windows. Stewards provided by trade unions had little effect. The organisers of the protests had taken steps to coordinate their movement after the chaotic and sometimes conflicting list of demands they'd presented to the government when the campaign first took off at the beginning of this month. Police said this second day of action in the space of 5 days drew 275,000 demonstrators in dozens of towns and cities, though that was little more than half the total last week. Within the next 24 hours, the government is to announce a package of measures, and with a 10-day half-term break looming, it'll be hoping the protest has peaked. Stephen Jessel, BBC News, Paris.
The Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, says he has evidence that British intelligence has tried to murder him. He says he'll produce that evidence when the time is right. His claims coincide with those of the former British intelligence officer David Shayler, who will appear in a Paris court on Wednesday to fight legal moves to extradite him to Britain. Colonel Gaddafi made his allegations in an exclusive interview with the BBC's World Affairs editor, John Simpson.
At his camp outside Tripoli, I met Colonel Gaddafi to interview him about his problems with the West.
Do you believe, as the former British intelligence agent David Shayler said, that Britain has intended to assassinate you?
Of course it is true, and it happened against me. Yes, it has happened, of course, and Britain was behind this attempt of assassination.
How do you know that? What evidence do you have, apart from what David Shayler says? Do you have other evidence of that?
There are many evidence. Yes, there are. And when the time comes, we will bring this evidence. What is the difference between Carlos, Bin Laden, Abu Nidal, Abu Abbas, America, England? There is no difference. All they are act like each other.
Colonel Gaddafi's big aim now is to bring an end to the UN sanctions against Libya. The sanctions were imposed because Libya refused to let the two suspects in the Lockerbie bombing be tried in a Scottish or an American court. Now London and Washington have compromised, and the two men will be tried in The Hague. Perhaps, he says, these two Libyans took their own revenge against America because America had bombed their homes and killed their children. We can solve this problem very easily. Then the families of the Lockerbie victims will be satisfied. All that's needed are some more guarantees.
This atmosphere of tension, of confrontation. I am very sorry about this.
Sorry about the confrontation?
Yes, of course.
It had been, as ever with Colonel Gaddafi, an eccentric performance, to say the least, but he does genuinely seem to be looking for ways to break out of his isolation now. John Simpson, BBC News, Libya.
Well, I'm joined on the line by David Whipple, who was an operations director at the CIA for 35 years, and he's now a spokesman for the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. David Whipple, thank you for joining us. I spoke to a regional analyst a little earlier who said that it was really the Islamic opposition in his own country who would have tried to assassinate Colonel Gaddafi, not the British. Would you go along with that?
Yes, I would. I think that's quite appropriate. I don't think that anybody in the British government is going to try to independently go and assassinate Gaddafi. I think the British are very much like us. I think that we will retaliate when terrorism action occurs against us in defense of our own property and our own lives, people in our country. But I don't think that they will go out and try to assassinate somebody on their own.
So are Gaddafi's comments all about his own image back home?
Well, I think that Gaddafi is very interested in trying to end this. He's seen this go on, the trouble that came from the Lockerbie bombings, the atrocities, and he thought that in the beginning, I think that things were going to go away and people were going to forget about it. They haven't. Sanctions continue. He would like to end it, and the best way he can do it is a country like the Netherlands, who have a reputation, at least with Gaddafi, as being a little bit more moderate in terms of prosecution and what will happen after the prosecution.
And what do the Americans currently make of Colonel Gaddafi? Would they be very cynical about that performance that we just saw, talking to John Simpson there?
Yes, I think they're very cynical. I think Americans in general think that Gaddafi is somebody who cannot be trusted and whose word cannot be trusted and who should never again be admitted into the councils of the rest of the world. I think that's the general impression in this country. All
right, David Whipple, many thanks indeed for joining us. Authorities in Nigeria on Monday began burying the first of at least 500 victims of this weekend's devastating pipeline explosion. They said some of the victims, who were too burned to be identified, would be placed in mass graves near the town of Jesse. Although flames from the ruptured pipeline occasionally flared up into the air, firefighters stopped fighting the blaze late on Monday and are now simply waiting for it to burn itself out. The British government has given details of its plans to sell off a major part of the country's air traffic control system. Ministers want to privatise 51% of the service, a stake which could be worth as much as $500 million. Unions claim that the sale may jeopardise air safety, but the government has said safety would remain the highest priority.
The National Air Traffic Service, Traffic Control, monitors and controls the skies above Britain. The government plans to sell just over half. It would keep some in state hands, but not enough to control the way it operated. Ministers now want to consult on how best to regulate the body when it's in private control.
This is a partnership between the government, the public sector, and the private sector, which gives us the best of both, gives us the safety, the regulation, the oversight, and the golden share of the government, and gives us the dynamism, the management, the technology, and the financial resources of the private sector. Everyone benefits.
But it's not how unions see it. They say safety will suffer in private hands. They cite recent near disasters. Last week it was revealed that two aircraft, one BA, the other Virgin Express, passed within 300 yards of each other. Unions say profits will be limited without traffic controllers working harder.
Now, there are international regulations about charges and how much you can charge. So we see the alternative of reducing numbers or making them work longer hours in an already very difficult system.
Much turns on the new £340 million control centre in Hampshire, due to open 2 years ago but subject to continuing delay through serious computer problems. The Civil Aviation Authority now runs air traffic control. Ministers say privatisation of traffic control will free it from current limits on public funds, meaning more money for more modern equipment. There is a sizable group of backbench Labour MPs who are opposed to privatisation full stop. The real political argument, though, will be to persuade the other doubters that safety will be maintained or improved in private hands. Stephen Evans, BBC News, the Civil Aviation Authority.
Chilean exiles in Britain say they're preparing to bring criminal and civil proceedings against the former leader, General Pinochet. The 82-year-old general was arrested in London on Friday at the request of Spanish judges who were investigating human rights abuses by his regime. But in Chile, the arrest has highlighted deep divisions within society. Our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins reports from the capital, Santiago, on the different reactions his arrest has provoked.
Deep divisions in Chile are out in the open again. General Pinochet's arrest in London has brought his right-wing supporters as close as they can get to the British Embassy in Santiago. They're demanding his immediate release, the return of the dictator they call the saviour of Chile. In these people's eyes, the disappearances, torture and killing of thousands of his opponents were all necessary to rescue the country from Marxism. The police defending democracy nowadays eventually resorted to water cannon, one of the milder weapons left over from the 17 years of General Pinochet's military dictatorship. Now some of the general's closest allies have been meeting in the hope of forcing his release. Gathering in a wealthy suburb of Santiago, these are still some of the most feared faces in the land, including Álvaro Corbalán, the head of intelligence at the time of the repression. One of General Pinochet's former ministers told us they just have one aim.
We are trying to do all what is possible that President Pinochet could be back in Chile in the next hours.
General Pinochet is now a senator for life in Chile, with immunity from prosecution here, part of the price the new democratic